Hey everyone, welcome back to Finance Fridays. Thanks again for clicking. I'm your host, Anthony Venuto, and on this week's episode, I want to dive into an interesting survey conducted by REMIC, which is the Real Estate and Mortgage Institute of Canada, and why it's important for Canadians to understand financial literacy when it comes to their mortgages. And more importantly, I'm going to go over some questions that relate to understanding your mortgages pre-approvals new to Canada, as well as touch on mortgage renewals, as these are some of the questions that we're getting here at InTouch Mortgage Solutions. So you can definitely email us at info@intouchmortgagesolutions.com. You can visit our website. You can actually follow us on social media on Instagram at @A_Venuto, as well as we're on Twitter @A_Venuto as well. And don't forget to leave those questions in the comment section as we'll go through them, and on next month's episode we'll go over some of your questions. Now, getting into REMIC's survey, they found that obviously 34.1% of Canadians are actually not happy with their current mortgage situation, and I'll get into some of the statistics here for you. Now, obviously the survey conducted indicated that 59% of respondents couldn't cite their current Bank of Canada overnight rate. They could not cite the Bank of Canada overnight rate, and 68.4% did not know their payments would be affected if the rate reached 5%. Roughly 21.8% of Canadians felt the interest rate hikes had made their mortgages unaffordable, and 34.1% regretted their current mortgage choice. Additionally, 30% said that they would have chosen a less expensive property if they had known mortgage rates would rise. Now, obviously, this begs the question on, what Canadians were thinking, obviously, during the process of buying during the pandemic. Obviously, the Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem coming out and stating that interest rates were going to remain low for longer. And obviously, that was a big motivator for a lot of Canadians to push on the gas to, take on mortgage debt, basically housing propping up the Canadian economy at that particular point in time. But obviously many Canadians who understand how economics may or may not work, obviously understand how inflation plays a big role in the Bank of Canada's outlook on where interest rates would be headed if interest rates were rising. Now, obviously with this data here, there are some significant data points that point to the lack of understanding that Canadians have when it comes to finances. And obviously the goal of our channel here at InTouch Mortgages, our Finance Fridays, is to help Canadians understand what they should be looking out for, especially when buying a home, whether it's financing, whether it's, understanding pre-approvals, renewals, interest rates, how the economy works at a very high level. Obviously, it's up to Canadians to do their own homework and due diligence when it comes to getting into a mortgage. This is the biggest decision, the biggest financial decision many Canadians will make in their lifetime. And interesting enough, so it's the President Joe White of REMIC who's indicating that Canadians require more financial literacy.
There's definitely also a need for financial literacy, especially when you're going to a bank to get a mortgage. You tend to hear all of the upsides of the variable rate, the low interest rates. And, from our perspective, one of the things that is beneficial of using a mortgage broker, for example, is that they're required to talk to individuals about the potential risks involved in the mortgage type they're getting. Whereas going directly through a financial institution, they're not required to do that.
And obviously it comes at no surprise as we start to get further into the curriculum, especially here in Ontario and Canada, where we are starting to get more and more educational programs. I've personally done a program for some of the local schools in the area to help bring this financial awareness, even at a younger age, to get people prepared for what reality has in store, especially when you look at where home prices are going, getting younger Canadians to start saving for their homes. But interesting enough, in this survey, the biggest thing is that Canadians, maybe would have made a different choice. Now, with that, over 50% of Canadians got their mortgages at a bank. And some of the conversations that we're having with our clients anecdotally are, when they're coming to us saying, Anthony, here's my situation. What do I do? I got the mortgage. The bank didn't really explain this to me. I wasn't fully brought up to speed on how these interest rates and the hikes could have impacted our finances month to month. And obviously there's a big problem. Someone who worked in the bank, myself, obviously, the bank has no responsibility to really, have that information conveyed to their clients. There are many great individuals that work at these financial institutions that do take it upon themselves to explain to clients how these processes and how these particular products work, especially when it comes to variable rate mortgages. Now, one key component obviously is that there's probably brokers out there too that we're selling variable rate mortgages, not really explaining to clients, hey, these are the upside, these are the downsides. They have to understand what happens if interest rates go up, how their payments are going to be impacted. It's important, as a broker has the fiduciary duty, to disclose all that information to their clients, whether it be fixed or variable. They have to understand the pros and the cons. And this is a very important conversation for you, our viewers, as we take this journey to continue financial literacy, help keep thousands of dollars in your pocket. I just really found this particular survey interesting. Now, out of this survey, obviously we're talking about pre-approvals and clients that are out there right now in the market, right? There's existing clients that maybe got a pre-approval, just accepted what it was given to them and without asking several questions. And the reason why I say that is because over the last few weeks, we've gotten some scenarios and situations that landed on our desk, not pre-approvals that we've done, but clients that are looking to maybe get a new pre-approval because their rate's about to expire. Having conversations that are not conversations they had with their original broker or bank are regarding their down payment and so on and so forth. So it's very important to be honest and transparent when you're talking to someone. Obviously, it can be a little bit problematic for some to have these conversations, as they might be worried about what they're saying and if they're going to, it's going to impact them. And the idea is that you want to disclose everything you can to your mortgage professional so they can help guide you on the right path. Case in point with this particular situation was the client had talked to us and we said, look, you have the pre-approval, that's great. You just did it last week. So yeah, that rate is a little bit worrisome because, checking the credit bureau, we saw where the credit was pulled, where the application was provided, but looking at the rate, there was no security. There was not a guaranteed rate. Ask the client, they're saying no, the rate was not guaranteed, and they were worried about that. So red flag number one pops up. Number two, we go through and say, look, if we're going to go on this journey together, we want to ask some more questions because we have to restart the application. And we get to the topic of down payment. And the down payment itself was actually coming from a sourced country or a country that was deemed to be in violation with Canada's guidelines, obviously on the government website, and reaching out to some of the banks to find out their stance on this particular down payment. Many banks had big problems with taking money from these particular countries. So that's another thing. So this client would have ended up proceeding with that pre-approval, not having that conversation, going into a firm offer. They could have been in a very dangerous position. Obviously, there are many setbacks, including some of the requirements for new to Canada individuals, like regarding the down payment. How much is from gifted? How much is from their own sources? Understanding all these nuances are very, very important. Now, for mortgage pre-approvals, we get these questions all the time. On that certificate, you should have a certificate from the lender themselves, not necessarily from the brokerage, right? If you want a pre-approval certificate, it's always great to have that certificate that says, look, you're pre-approved, this is your expiry date, and understanding that that date, that window, has to basically be met. If you do close prior to your expiry date, then the rate will be held and you'll have no problem. There are certain scenarios where if you're a day or two off, you could get an exception, but that is not guaranteed in this higher rate environment. As bond yields continue to push forward, many clients who maybe have a pre-approval with a lower rate looking to execute on that right now, especially ahead of the fall market. We might see this ramp up in home sales as these pre-approvals dwindle away, these lower rate ones. But what happens when that rate expires? If you have a rate that's in the fives, right, you might be qualifying at 7. If you're qualifying now with a new rate, with a 6 in front of it, well, you're qualifying at 8. And what does that do to your pre-approval amount? It will obviously impact the amount of qualification. And one key component, some of the questions we're having, conversations is, Anthony, we had a pre-approval done. We wanted only this amount, and that was the rate that was held. And now we ended up getting, more income. Our jobs changed. We got a little bit more as a salary. And obviously, maybe we have less down payment, but we need to bump up the mortgage amount. Well, obviously with that particular rate, you have to have the prerequisites for that mortgage pre-approval. So that if the mortgage is set at 500 and now you need a mortgage of 650, well, that pre-approval is no longer good. Most lenders will use a 10% variance, most broker-friendly banks, saying, hey, you got 10% runway to go up or $100,000, depending on the lender. Now, you can always go down from the original pre-approved mortgage amount, but to go up is a little bit more challenging depending on your circumstance. You want to make sure that you have the right amount. Get your pre-approval for the maximum amount that you can qualify for. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, but at least you'll have the runway, one less thing to worry about. Now, the last and final question that we've been getting was around renewals. And obviously, as millions of mortgages approach renewal in higher interest rate environments, many Canadians are conscientious about their finances, what it's going to do to their household budgets. And obviously, you have to be prepared for an increase on your mortgage, especially if you're renewing in the next few months. Most Canadians are going to see if they have a variable rate mortgage, their payments would have doubled. Maybe you're on a trigger rate, your payments have moved up slightly. If the Bank of Canada increases again on September 6th, if that happens, if that ends up happening, then you have to be prepared for an additional bump up in your monthly expenses. And with fixed rate mortgages, most Canadians can anticipate at least a 50 to 60% bump up in those payments depending on what they got their mortgage at. Maybe back in 2018 where rates were in the 3s, and now we're definitely in the higher 5s, for 5 years, and then 3 years probably with a 6. And 1 year's, have a 7 in front of them. So depending on that mortgage renewal, you have to be prepared for it and looking at the options that you may have. With a variable rate mortgage, a lot of these products, if you got the full frills product, right, you would be at a 3-month penalty to exit a variable rate mortgage. But keeping in mind that prime jumped to 7.20% as of right now. And that means that a lot more of your payment, even if you're adjusted to payments that move with prime or you're on a trigger rate, well, that penalty could be significantly higher than what you may anticipated when you originated that mortgage. So you need to keep those things in mind. And we're working with some clients right now to help them consolidate some of their debt and keep those payments as low as possible. They might be looking at re-amortizing back to 30 years. Some clients may have 10 to 15 years left or 18 years. And they may want their mortgage payments to be reduced. We might bump them back up to 25 just to give them a little bit of pressure relief on those monthly payments until things settle down. Obviously, the question is when that will happen. But don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, next week we are going to be talking about our monthly mortgage updates. Talk a little bit about bond prices because they have come up significantly. As of right now, filming this video this week, we're looking at interest on those bonds hovering around the 4.1.5% mark, the highest we have seen since 2007, since the great financial crisis. And obviously, as you're aware, these bond prices do dictate where fixed rate mortgages are headed. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind. But with that being said, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified every time we post a new video. And don't forget to leave your comments in the comments section below. And if you want to play around with some options to see exactly what those payments look like, in the description box below, you can download our free app, play around with those payment calculators, and see exactly how you should be preparing for those potential increases if you're facing mortgage renewal. And last but not least, with mortgage renewals, it's best to get ahead of it. Put that pre-approval in, lock in a rate for 90 to 120 days. Hedge your bet against future increases. It doesn't cost you anything. So once again, leave those comments in the comment sections below. And wishing everyone a wonderful Friday and an even better weekend ahead. We'll see you next week. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for clicking.